Today, I'm reading 6 of the most terrifying Reddit stories that will have you sleeping with your lights on. Enjoy. I had a hard time. I heard the stories of the park rangers finding random staircases in the woods. This only happens to those guys out in the Pacific Northwest and Rocky Mountains, though. See, down here in the South, if you see a staircase in the woods, it's probably like one of those old fur trapper cabins or a rich man's hunting retreat. In the South, we were a completely different problem. In the South, people are really attached to their religion. There are towns with nearly as many churches as people. That is why our problem is a little more pressing and problematic. If somebody sees a church out in the woods, they're gonna think it's gripping part of our history, and they're gonna need to prove their fealty by walking right on in the door. Tourists really ain't much better. They see a church in the woods and they think it's just some historic relic from some back congregations, so they march right on in, and to get a selfie with some broken down pews, have a good laugh. And those crazy hillbillies, they really can't pass up the chance to get like a self-righteous Indiana Jones. Nobody realizes that the forest tore down most of the churches and cabins years ago. There is no church in the wild, and there's no God in the jungle, but evil never sleeps. Let me rewind this story. I'm already getting ahead of myself. I started as a forest ranger when I was only 25 years old. I had joined the local sheriff's department at the age of 21, and 6 months later I found myself in basic law enforcement training. By the time I was 22, the back roads of the rural southern country were my beat. I handled everything from severe serving points to looking for lost children. After a couple of years, it got old. I had already been shot once after stumbling across a marijuana farm. Plus, honestly, most night shifts were spent sitting alone in a patrol car, staring out into the stretch of a blacktop and trying to stay awake. It wasn't an adventure, it was just a job. Soon I accidentally stumbled across a job listing that offered a 20% raise to go hiking in the woods. I jumped at the opportunity. Yeah, I'd still be a cop, but there was much worse. What else could happen? I was raised a country boy. I could handle the woods better than most. It started it started off wonderfully. I was assigned to a small 200-acre state neutral reserve area. The work was light and pretty easy. I spent my days hiking the trails, talking to hikers, and occasionally running off kids that decided the river was a great alternative to sitting in class. The worst thing that happened was the first 3 years was kid getting swept away in the current after some heavy rains. It was only a handful of real emergencies in the time frame. It seemed like being a ranger would be luxury life. I even managed to add certifications in fire protection, technology, and animal care, and management to my resume. Thanks to the online classes and ample downtime, I was laying the groundwork for a promotion while getting a grade 10. Life was perfect. Then the news came down that I was getting a transfer. I was supposed to be shipped off to the largest park in the state. It covered nearly 9,300 acres in 2 countries and averaged between 1.26 million visitors every year. I arrived for my orientation period in mid-spring. The days were warm and the nights were cool. We still had a couple of weeks before the visitors started pouring in, so I could spend 2 weeks working nights with other rangers and then start the day as a big cultural festival began. Over the course of 3 days, 65,000 people would visit the park. The night went as well, could be expected. With an area 2/3 the size of Manhattan to learn, there was no way to learn, even nook and cranny. but I was confident. Day shift training started at the first RV rolling through the park gates on Friday morning. The train of the vehicle stretched out over 5 miles of rural country roads. My training ranger Robert and I were assigned to traffic control. Traffic control is the bane of an officer's existence. It will make you question the average IQ of a human race in a spectacular fashion. So I was relieved when we received a call over the radio. It was a lost child that hadn't been near Beckett's Ridge. It sounded like an awful call. A lost child is scary and emotionally are high. However, Beckett's Bridge isn't the type of place where the landscape makes it easy to think you've lost someone, even though they're only 20 yards away. The terrain is full of dips and weird curves that can trick the eyes. So with a smile on my face, I hopped up on the terrain gator and Robert Sweet and sped off. So we arrived. I knew this was anything but ordinary. The buzzer was sitting on a fallen log in a catatonic state. She couldn't speak and was completely unresponsive to any stimulants. I tried snapping my fingers in her face and touching her shoulder. She sat stiff as a statue. The father was walking in circles, muttering to himself and running his fingers through his hair. Occasionally, he let her scream. The other child that was the only one that seemed to behave in a normal manner. He was 7 years old, with dirty blonde hair and a carefree expression on his face. That naturally meant he was the one I questioned. When's the last time you saw your sibling? When Mommy stopped to tie my shoe. We was all over by the fence talking to this nice man in a black suit. In the black suit? Was there anything special about this suit? It looked really old, like one of those great-grandpa wears to church. He couldn't be a bad man if he looked like a great-grandpa. He even gave Eddie a piece of candy. My heart dropped and Robert's face went pale. This wasn't a kid that just stepped over a fallen log or walked off a trail. Robert got on the radio and sent out a preliminary information. He also requested a couple of officers from the local sheriff's department. We were going to shut down all traffic leaving the park until a search could be coordinated. I got more information about Eddie from the kid and put it on the radio. After assuring the parents that they were going to do our best, we headed down the trail in the direction that Eddie was last seen walking. It took us less than 3 minutes to find the first signs. There was a piece of bright red fabric hanging from a branch beside the trail. It was more like a clump of threads and a piece of fabric, but it matched the description of Eddie's shirt, fire engine red. I dipped off the trail and found another clump of threads 10 yards southeast of the trail. I radioed for Robert to join me and headed off into the trees. The sounds of animals surrounded us. The birds singing, squirrels in the trees. I even saw a fox scurry away from us. They all made sounds, but there was nothing that sounded like another human walking through trees. We continued on for nearly half a mile until we reached Clemens Creek. The first thing I noticed as we approached it, the creek was the only sounds. About the silence sent a shiver throughout my body. Animals don't usually go silent unless there's a predator nearby or the weather is about to take a nasty turn. The sky was crystal clear. The blue of the bottomless lake. That left me with only one other consideration. As I crept through the trees, I flipped the restraining strap on my holster forward and began to blade my stance. When I broke the tree line, confusion washed over me. Seeing the eastern lake was something I had never seen before. I had seen them before, but not here. It had been one there 3 nights before when I was standing here in the exact same spot with Robert and listening to a lecture on navigating the side. A large overhanging rock that called Panther's Throne. The boards were rough and weatherly worn. A handful of fieldstone steps led up to the front door. It looked like something out of a William Faulkner's or Louis L'Amour's novel. It looked to Robert for some words of explanation as he came to the trees. He had nothing to offer. He came to a halt so fast that he slipped and fell back on his back. Time slowed as I glanced from Robert to the old church and back again. Then the world shifted gears as everything went into hyperdrive. The front door of the church flew open with a crack, and I looked back across the creek. In the doorway stood a little boy in a ripped and tattered fire engine red t-shirt. His face was a mask of pain and confusion. Without hesitation, I broke into a sprint towards the creek. Behind me, I could hear Robert, a world away, screaming, "Stand down, Ranger!" I hit the creek at full speed. My boots sunk into the muddy bottom and began to fill with water. Quickly, it began to feel like I was dragging 2 lead weights, my ankles and knees. I slipped and fell on my face. Water and mud filled my nose and my mouth. The water soaked my ballistic vest and pressed down on my back. The weight threatened to force the air from my lungs. I became terrified that I wouldn't be able to stand without my newfound burden. Thrusting my hands into the creek and bottom and tried to push myself up, or just forward some friction, so that they disappeared beneath the silt. A rock rolled from beneath my palm. The shifting balance teemed with the current to send me spiraling onto my back. I could only see the crystal blue skies of the sky getting darker every second. At some point I managed to get a foot squarely at the bottom of it and I tried to right myself. I shoved with everything I had left and managed to pop above the surface. I was facing the wrong way, but I was alive and gasping. I don't know how I did it, but I managed to turn back around. I dragged the weight of all that mud and water through the current up the eastern bank with my legs and lungs burning. I began hustling forward with everything left in me. I developed tunnel vision as I fought my way forward, so it took me a second to realize that there was an old man now stood behind Eddie. The old man wore a crooked smirk, but that's not what scared me. There was something else in the church. It was something big enough to block out most of the light from coming from the southern-facing windows. I don't have the words to describe what I saw that day. It looked like a human, but it wasn't. It looked like a bad impersonist portrait of what a human should be. The edges were kind of blurred and the skin looked like it was covered in swirls and ridges, and it tried to coalesce. That that didn't do it justice. There was so much wrong with what I was seeing that in my mind begged for me to turn away as horror gripped my stomach and heart. I let out a scream as I unholstered my pistol, closing the last 2 dozen yards as a smell began to waft towards me. It was like someone burning clove and sage to hide the rot of death. Then as I hit the bottom step of the thing, standing between the old man let out a scream. It wasn't really audible. It was more like a sub-harmonic wave that struck my amygdala and triggered something primal. My knees quivered, my breath caught, tears flowed from my eyes as fear coursed down every nerve of my body. The church door slammed shut as my body gave up. I crashed forward. My head smacked the giant iron cross, and it struck me as odd that the long vertical perched above the horizontal bars. It was nearly midnight when I woke up in the hospital emergency room. Robert was perched on the edge of the chair, in the corner staring at his feet. When he looked up, I could see relief wash all over his face, over the stone of anxiety that had become in his face. I will never forget the conversation we had. Where am I? We had a little flightened out in the park. You've been there for nearly 12 hours. Where's Eddie? Eddie is gone. There isn't a single trace of him, and there won't ever be. Those threads we found are the only thing besides his family memories that prove that he was ever in the park. We've got a team of deputies, state rangers, and federal guys searching the park now, but they'll never find the kid though. Well, maybe in a year or two he'll turn up somewhere, but it won't be in our park. The old man got out of the church. There was no church. BS, you didn't see it. Robert got up and went to the door. He looked both ways, down the corridor, and then shut it. There was nothing there. I didn't see anything. You didn't see anything? Some old pervert slipped out of the park with a kid. Do you understand me? I knew that when I saw Robert. And there was an old church on the eastern side of that creek. I was dang near inside it. You didn't see it. You started going around talking about what you think you saw, and will see some people you wish you hadn't. I'm now talking about psychiatrics and rangers that are better at pushing paperwork than hiking. I'm talking about guys in cheap black suits and people that... There was a knock at the door, and the nurse walked in with a guy wearing black scrubs. They carted me off to get a CT scan of my head. They were afraid I might have rattled my brain. It seems they were under the impression I hit my head on a rock when I fell in the creek. I remained silent about where the cut on my forehead came from. When they rolled me back to the little room, Robert was gone. I never saw Robert again. By the time I returned to work 2 weeks later, he had applied for and received a transfer. I remained silent for the next 13 years despite everything I've seen. 11. Even when Eddie showed up one Panther's throat with his heart not missing, I remained silent. I would warn you guys to stay away from the churches if you saw them, but there weren't many new guys. The ranger and our park belonged to each other in the park fire sequence. It was the brotherhood, the fraternity. Could never acknowledge. Story from my childhood. My parents and I had moved into a house in Addison, Vermont. After moving our stuff in, my mom and I went to Amos. Yes, Amos was still around to get a few basic things we didn't have: toilet paper, trash bags, and the like. One of the things she bought was a welcome mat, a simple red mat that said welcome in black letters. We purchased our items in when my stepdad was busy arranging and unpacking. My mom placed the mat on our porch, and we went about our unpacking. The following morning, there was a dead bird on the porch. Nothing out of the ordinary about it. Just a dead sparrow lying on our welcome mat. We had 2 cats at the time, but we had not let them out inside. We wanted to accumulate them first. A little puzzled but unconcerned, my stepdad tossed the carcass into the woods. Next morning, there's a dead chipmunk. Again, we threw it in the woods. This went like clockwork every morning. There's a dead mouse, chipmunk, bird, or even small rabbit. Not a single day passed was missed. Our cat started going outside, and we would also occasionally bring presents. But our cats would bring them to us physically and proudly drop them at our feet. We never saw the mysterious cat. We weren't even fully positive it was a cat, but the action seemed typical of a cat. So that's what we assumed. This became a normal part of our daily routine. Get up, let the cats out, grab the shovel, remove the dead critter. This continued literally for a few years. We had moved into it when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, and the next part of the story happened when I was about 10 or 11. So we lived right across the street from Lake Chaplin. It's a big lake and serves as a border between Vermont and New York. I loved to fish, and it had often my after-school activity and my weekend pastime. I became good friends with a couple named Quinn and Gordy, who owned a little convenience store a half a mile from my house. I would go and buy fish hooks and worms there. Gordy's mother was an old Native American woman. I can't remember her tribe. One day I was in the store, and Gordy's mother was there. I was telling Gordy about the ongoing situation with dead animals on the porch. His mother interjected and asked a question. "Is your door red?" I told her no, it's white. She asked me, "Do you have anything red sitting outside of the door?" I was about to say no, but I remembered our welcome mat was red. "Actually, yes, our welcome mat is red. Why?" She said to me, "The color red is a sign to the cat that you are hungry and need food. The cat is trying to feed you. If you get rid of the red mat, you will stop seeing animals showing up." I thought this sounded a little far-fetched, but I politely thanked her for the advice, bought my hooks, and left. Upon arriving home, instead of going to the lake, I went inside and told my mom what Gordy's mother had said. Her response was, "Why not?" Couldn't hurt. So that night, we took the mat outside. The next morning, I got up and found no dead animal on the porch. I woke up my mom up and told her. We were surprised, but not fully convinced. We elected to leave the mat inside for a few days, and if nothing showed up, put it back outside and see what happens. No animal showed up for the next day. Then we put the red mat back outside, and immediately started finding dead critters again. I did not understand the reason for this because I did not buy into Cordy's mom's explanation of certain animals. This one doesn't really have like a opening thing, so it seemed like just an ordinary box. The wood was old and weathered. The fastenings were heavy brass, and the lid was inlaid with an ornate silver symbol. My father willingly willed it to me after the state executed him for murder. He left no explanation or instructions, only this small, mysterious wooden box. At first I considered tossing it into the river. The last thing I wanted was a reminder of the man that had abandoned his son in favor for a life of violence. But being a weak-willed person that I am, my curiosity soon overwhelmed me, and I could stand in the mystery box no longer. Opening the box, however, was easier said than done. Attempts to pry open the latches with my hands yielded only abraded fingers and broken nails. Screwdrivers were snapped, hammers were shattered, and drill motors were burnt out. Yet the contents of the box remained out of reach, encased in a wooden tome determined not to yield its secrets. Eventually I gave up doing what I've always done when I can't get what I want. I told myself that whatever was inside of the box was not worth my effort, and did my best to forget about it. But the box would not allow me to forget so easily. And one night when I was sleeping, it opened of its own accord. I woke to the eerie silver luminance that filled my bedroom. A deep sense of persuasive cold that chilled the surroundings to absolute stillness. As I sat up in bed, I was overwhelmed by a sense of unfamiliarity, as I had been transferred somewhere that looked very much like a bedroom, but was home to someone or something else. The silver light was illuminating from my closet door, leading a sense of unreality to everything that bathed its pallid sheen, casting odd shadows that seemed to creep and move on into the corner of my eye. I could feel myself standing up, though I had not willed to do so, and slowly, quietly, I crept towards the closet. My fingertips brushed the doorknob, recoiling for a moment from the penetrating cold. Then, resolutely, firmly, I grasped it, pulling the door open to reveal the box. The hinges had sprung open wide. The light spilling forth was piercing and intense. My eyes filled up with light and felt as if it would soon burst. not tear them away. I could feel myself falling slowly forward into an abyss of silver light that enveloped my vision and became my entire being. Just before it swallowed me, the box snapped shut, and I found myself on the floor, my sweat-drenched cheek pressed tight against the cold, rough wood of the box. I pushed myself back to my feet. The eerie silver light was gone. My room seemed once again my own. Yet something was still not right. The cheek that had touched the box was throbbing with a burning pain. I wandered into the bathroom and flipped on the light, gasping at my grotesque reflection. The symbol on the box was burned into my cheek. I reached up to touch it, but as I did so, it faded. But the brand was not the only souvenir the box had left with me. I could feel a presence in me, an unwelcome guest inside my mind. I find myself missing time, looking at strange locals with blood splattered on my clothing. But that is not to worry the most. What worries me the most is the call I received from my lawyer yesterday, asking for clarification on the amendment I had made my will. He wondered why the only thing I wanted to leave my son when I dies was an unopened box. In 1969, my uncle attended the University of Washington with Ted Bundy. They were both psychology majors, and I developed a friendship. My uncle Danny said that Ted seemed to be a relatively normal guy. At the time, he used to be quite to the ladies' man. Apparently, according to my uncle, he had a lot of on and off again relationships. He didn't speak much about Bundy as the years went by. My guess was that he felt ashamed for not realizing that he'd been friends with someone that was pure evil. Last Christmas, I met with my extended family in Washington over winter break. I was going to school in Tulsa at the time, and plane tickets were expensive. But Uncle Danny and Aunt Jane haven't seen you in years, my mom said wearily. So I changed my mind, knowing that Uncle Danny was there, and I needed to write an interesting story for my journalism class. I wanted to be blunt when I said I saw Uncle Danny. I cornered him into the living room where there was a golf tournament was playing. My grandpa was sleeping on the lazy boy recliner, so we were practically alone. I hate golf, I said. Yeah, me too, he said, smirking. How's college been, Cody? To be honest, I'm running out of article ideas. I thought you could help me. I said, but I was a psychology major. I'm not sure how helpful I'd be. His tone had changed. You can trust me, Uncle Danny. I won't think anything bad of you, I said, placing my hand on his shoulder. I think you'd change your mind once you found out the truth, he sighed. Danny knew I would be persistent. He walked out onto the porch as he handed me a Budweiser and looked out into the forest. Ted and I were close friends, in fact. We were even roommates for 3 semesters. He refused to look at me. Uncle Danny told me how he always felt Bundy was peculiar, but she just couldn't pinpoint it. But all the signs were there. He took a long sip of his beer. He told me how Bundy had an interest in binding women, particularly during sex. In fact, Bundy spoke with Danny about sex on many occasions. He used to tell him the types of horrific things he'd do to women. According to Bundy, the women were constantly being tortured. He used to tell me about a little girl named Annie who had beautiful blue eyes and stunning blonde hair. He had told me they were friends and she looked up to him, claimed one day she vanished, and he was devastated. Of course, now that I think about it, Ted probably killed her, he said, trying to hide his tears. Uncle Danny's stories got me more vivid, especially pertaining to Ted's sex life, where one of his girlfriends said he was willing to be cut multiple times without being penetrated. But Ted felt it was never good enough. He asked me once, have you ever thought about having sex with a corpse? But I laughed. I thought he was joking at this point. Uncle Danny threw his beer can off the deck. I threw him another beer, waiting on him to speak. He told me how once him and went to a party together. Ted ended up taking a girl home. When Danny asked how the date went, Ted didn't say anything. Instead, he stared at my uncle blankly. The next day, my dad and Ted were driving around in his infamous Beetle. My uncle noticed how Ted's door handle was broken. He offered to fix it, but Ted declined. My uncle also smelled an awful stench coming from the car. When he asked Ted about the smell, he simply said that he had ran over a raccoon and it got stuck in the frame of his car. He'd also remember Bundy looking at several different women at the college campus. Bundy definitely had a type of Uncle Danny caught up quickly. He preferred slim brunettes, in fact. He set up Bundy with a fellow classmate. Later on, he found out from the girl that Bundy was a total freak. According to her, he came on with a little too strong and she ran off. She never gave the details of exactly what happened between her and Bundy. After Bundy graduated, my uncle and him still kept in touch. They'd write one another. Ted would often send very detailed letters to my uncle, mostly about how upset he was with the women in his family. He was very bitter. My uncle tried to cheer him up. A few months passed, and my uncle hadn't heard from Bundy until yet another letter came in the mail, without a return address. He immediately recognized it as Ted's handwriting. My uncle never forgot what it said. I know I'm a bad man, but somewhere I don't care. What I've done is unexplainable, unbelievable, enthralling, nothing you've ever felt before. Till we meet again, my friend. It was the last letter that my uncle received from Ted. Later, the news began to circulate about murders that were traced to a serial killer. All those women that seemed like Ted's type, but I kept my mouth shut. I mean, what were the odds that my close friend was a serial killer? The guilt I saw in my uncle's eyes. Somehow, deep down, he felt responsible. It's like Bundy said, we serial killers are your sons. We are husbands. We are everywhere. And there will be more of children dead tomorrow. You just never know when evil is looking right at you, or even living in your home. In kindergarten when I was 4 years old. The kid that was in kindergarten usually only stick to one friend, so I had a hard time finding myself a friend. I was alone for about 3 weeks. From the day that I started, however, after those 3 weeks a new kid started. His name was Samuel. He was the same age as me. We had a lot of similar interests. The way I got to know him was when he sat down next to me when we was eating lunch. He was very kind, and since I was more than less desperate for a friend, I just was nice to him. After eating lunch, we ran out in the playground and started to play like normal kids. We grew a really, really close relationship, and we became best friends. We had many sleepovers, which at our age wasn't as normal, but we just never grew tired of each other, and our parents accepted it since we were so nice to each other and we respected the rules. One evening, about 7 months after I had first met Samuel, my mom entered my room with a really worried face. She sat down beside me and started talking about how Samuel was gone. At the time, no one really knew what happened to him. Samuel's parents had gone out to shop some groceries, and that is when Samuel went missing. My mom tried to explain it to me, and I understood that he was missing, but I thought I would get to see him again. The police searched for him many, many weeks, but they never found him. They even questioned me and wondered if I had seen him. I had not seen him since my mom told me he was gone. They stopped searching and they thought he was kidnapped, so the whole country was on high alert. This was very rare in our country. So many people were worried. About several months after he had gone missing, I saw him again. I had fallen asleep, but I woke up at night to a quiet knock on my window. I made my way to the window and saw that he was pointing at the lock of my window, indicating he wanted me to open the window. I smiled and said with a high voice, "Samuel!" He stared at me as if he got scared, and then he went on telling me not to talk loud, as he didn't want my mom to find out he was there. He climbed into my room and started explaining why he had went missing. "I'm sorry for not coming back to get you. I was on a treasure hunt. Guess what? I found a beautiful Disney World. I live with Mickey Mouse now in his clubhouse. I really want you to visit us. Do you want to?" I believed him. I believed every single word that he told me, and I got so excited as I thought I would get to meet Mickey Mouse. He said he would have to be silent, and that he would have to talk to the forest, as if there was a portal to Disney World. I agreed in excitement as we made our way to the forest that was just a few hundred meters away from my house. We walked around for 20 minutes into the forest before we stood close by an edge of a cliff that leading down to a deep river. "Here we are, Phil. We just need to jump. Under the water there will be a portal that will lead us to the Disney World." Samuel's voice got higher, a little darker, when he said the last few words. I honestly got freaked out a little bit, and there was no way I had the courage to jump. I told him that I was afraid and started to cry a little bit, but then he reached out his hand and said, "Let's jump together. I promise I won't let go." He smiled at me very disturbingly, almost as if he threatened me. His wide eyes lightened up in the darkness in the skies. It was almost as if he was hypnotizing me to jump with him. I declined his offer, and then he said, "Fine, I will jump first, and then you come after me, okay?" I agreed, as I felt that there was more comfortable. He, without even rethinking his actions, jumped down. I made my way over to the edge and looked down only to see the water flowing downwards. I felt so alone at the time, and that's when I started crying. I didn't know how to even get home. We had just been running the whole way and taking a lot of turns. Samuel never came back to me, and I thought I sat there on a cold stone waiting for somebody to come. But no one ever did, at least not that night. I can't remember much of what happened after, but however, I remember a police officer waking me up. He told me that my mom was hurt because I was missing. I explained to the officer that Samuel had visited me, and that he tried to take me to Disneyland. One second, I gotta get water. Oh, it's gonna be obvious to edit it, but okay. The man took up a notepad and started writing, possibly what I told him. He followed me back to his car where another officer was, smoking a cigarette. The officer told the guy smoking the cigarette, he says that he has seen Samuel, the missing kid. He has given me a very detailed description of him. What happened, I actually believe him. We should take him back to the station to interview him. The man looked back at me with a worried face. I was transferred to the station where I would have to answer some questions. That further led to an investigation in the river where I searched the river, only to find the body of Samuel. He was declared dead the same minute the divers had found him. He'd been laying there for at least 3 days, and they had no chance. I had actually seen him the day I had wandered into the forest. The police declared my answers and his actions as imagination, and there was no link between me and Samuel paying me a visit that night. Ever since, I've frozen. We'll never know what truly happened to Samuel. But I swear to God, sometimes I wake up to a quiet knock on my window, but every time I look outside, there's nothing there. Little Timmy Marlowe went missing, our whole town went sick with worry. Timmy was one of the town's poster boys, a real good kid. They'd say he'd always been a straight-A student, a good-natured little boy who was polite to everyone in town. His disappearance was a tragedy. They'd carted him, the town angel, in the newspapers. At first, his family had expected a ransom, a little boy being snatched off the streets as usual planned. They might have been watching the family and expected a huge sum of his safe return. While the Morrows were not rich by any means, the whole town had come together to donate to the family. They'd received more money than they could do with. Nobody minded. Anything to bring little Timmy home. However, as days crept into weeks, nothing happened. No calls, no emails. Search parties were created by dutiful volunteers. All the people in the town had come out to help search for little Timmy. Flyers were plastered on every pole and building. You couldn't go a block without seeing Timmy's sweet smile shining back at you. They'd searched for weeks and weeks until all hope seemed lost. The little boy just vanished. In the end, his parents blamed themselves for what happened. They were always too busy to watch him over him, working full-time jobs for very busy schedules. That's why they hired me to babysit for them. I always had lived beside the Morrow family. After my husband Albert's passing, I had gotten quite lonely in the house by myself. I looked for the job immediately. I had known that Timmy was a sweet little boy. Why would I refuse? When Timmy had disappeared, I had told everyone that Timmy had never returned home that afternoon, which was true. I was never known to lie. Nobody had known Timmy better than I did, which was the reason, in the end, I had killed him. At first, Timmy hadn't been a problem for me. He was kind and polite, especially when his parents were around. As time went by, Timmy's attitude had changed. Timmy was a monster. I was the one who had seen him when he thought no one was looking, the way he'd kill the neighbors' animals and smile when they were just reported missing. I'd seen him sneak a rat poison into the family's drinks, not enough to kill, just to cause them very, very, very violently ill. I never said a word to anyone. Then Timmy took hitting me. The bruises were never questioned. I was old after all. I bruised quite easily. Timmy took advantage of this and began to attack me more and more. He'd have fits and then throw things. I left one night with a broken nose, had to lie that I had fallen. Elderly ladies do slip all the time, luring him with cookies and treats. It hadn't been hard to do. What child would resist my baking? Timmy was dead instantly. All I had to do was come up with a way to get rid of him. The townspeople had never suspected me. I was just an innocent, sweet old Mrs. Astor after all. I even volunteered to help make meals for the dedicated people wanting to help search for the missing child. I came prepared with my famous meat pies and lemonade, smiling pleasantly ear to ear as the search party enjoyed my refreshments. They never realized that they had ended up finding little Timmy after all. Before I go, I just wanted to tell all of you, I'm not sure if you can really tell, but I got a new microphone. And in the description, there'll be a link to davidmaloneystories.com. Credit for the video for one of the stories. And remember, everybody, you never know what's in the dark with you. See you around.